Hello again, it's time to have a look through the papers. With us this morning, the political editor at the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, and entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle. There they are, Nigel, Kate, good morning to you both. Thanks for getting up so early and being with us. Let's kick off with the Sunday Times. Nigel, talk us through this one, a plan to cut an extra £400 off fuel costs.
Yes, this is being put up by the Chancellor, Nadim Zahawi, and the idea is to get £400 off energy bills, but not until January, and he'll present this plan to whoever the new Prime Minister is, who may or may not accept it. Much more interesting, and certainly the best idea I've heard so far, actually comes from the boss of Scottish Power, Keith Anderson. And he's got a radical scheme to actually freeze bills now at the present rate of £1,970. The freeze would last for 2 years. Suppliers would cover the shortfall in loans, which would be repaid over a period of 15 years. And that money would come back either on a gradual increase in bills or from taxation. But certainly, this scheme would actually take the pain out of the sudden energy rises we're facing, up to £5,000 next year. And it certainly is so far the best idea I've had anyone come up with. But apparently, it was rejected by Rishi Sunak back in April.
Do they tell us why he rejected that?
Well, we don't know why he rejected it, but then the cost was actually estimated at about 15 billion. Now, with these kind of loans, you're talking about 50 billion. So at the moment, both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are trying to come up with plans of their own, neither of which seem to be, at this stage anyway, terribly well thought out.
When you said you'd heard of a plan that you thought was going to work, I thought you were talking about Gordon Brown. He seems to have a new plan about something every day, doesn't he? Let's talk about... He does.
Keir Starmer's back to...
Say that again, sorry, Nigel?
Keir Starmer has just come back from holiday to fill the gap.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's where we're going now. Kate, what has Sir Keir Starmer been talking about?
Well, apparently tomorrow we're going to hear substantial plans from him in terms of how he feels the fuel crisis should be tackled. Now, as you've already mentioned, people have suggested that he has been missing in action somewhat, as many in the UK have this extreme plight of dealing with all of the incoming right now, not just the fuel crisis and the cost of living crisis, but indeed the concerns in terms of the water, the heat, how that might impact future food prices as well, which were already on the up, which you've alluded to this morning because of crops and the challenges there. It really is a bitter set of news for the public at the moment, and if you're in a hard-pressed family and you're in a hard-pressed household, you know just how concerning your bills are right now before we even get to the anticipated rises ahead. So what we've got here is a front cover story suggesting that we're going to have the answers tomorrow, but I think many are looking at why has there been perhaps too much, too little, too late in terms of an announcement from the opposition, and indeed why have we got too much attention focused on the political leadership contenders and not enough on this real crisis facing many households in the UK.
Kate, I want to stay with you and bring up the front page of the Sunday Telegraph because they also talk about this. Liz Truss saying she would scrap this £400 help for your energy bills, but only for some people.
That's right, and there's a few details missing in terms of what she's suggesting is that actually not everyone needs that support. And if that money, I guess, was put back into people who needed it more, upping the support for people who needed it more, there would be some sense in that. But we don't have clarity at all in terms of who she's suggesting should be missing out on this. And there's certainly not much more in terms of what extra support measures are going to come into place for those who need it the most. As we know, there's been some criticism in terms of Liz Truss over recent weeks. The suggestion put on the Kay Burley debate that will the real Liz Truss stand up, as she toos and froes on issues quite a lot. And I think that idea that we need a leader of consistency, courage and conviction is so important. So I think there will be, again, a lot of analysis when this information comes out of who she's suggesting misses out, and indeed who is going to get the extra benefits needed.
Okay, let's change the story completely. Leave energy alone. So depressing. We'll leave that until the next hour. But an equally sad story, although good news this morning, Salman Rushdie. We're hearing that there are reports that he's off the ventilator and he is able to talk. The Observer, I'm sure this is what many of us actually believed about his life as well, Nigel. He thought that his life was normal again after that fatwa that was issued for him in the 80s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kimberly. I think that's what we all thought. And this was an interview that Salman Rushdie gave to a German magazine just 2 weeks before the stabbing. And he obviously thought that the fatwa had if not disappeared, was no longer a great threat to him, and he was more worried about other issues. And obviously, what happened shows that it was still very much sort of in play. I mean, I remember talking to Salman Rushdie's close protection officers back in the 1990s, and for them it was one of their worst gigs because they had to live in his basement. But gradually, that security seems to have been withdrawn. And now we see what the result of that actually is. I mean, he also is talking about it could have been much worse back then if there'd been social media around, because that would have been an easy way to actually disseminate the fatwa. Instead, it was faxed out to people. But even so, it just shows that how long-lasting these things are.
Do you think that perhaps as we learn more of the attacker, that he was a lone wolf acting on his own? It was just the fact that Rushdie was giving this lecture near where he lived, it was all opportunist.
Yes, I mean, we don't know the motive yet about what in fact happened. And yes, the lone wolf argument is obviously one that they're working on over in the States. But even so, even if he was a lone wolf, that he was inspired by the original Iranian fatwa, in the same way that terrorists can be lone wolves, but are inspired by the ideology of either Al-Qaeda or ISIS.
Okay, let's go back to politics actually, Kate. The front of the Sunday Express, and actually no, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. I thought you were talking about Liz Truss. Let's leave politics. Is it Liz Truss? Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm getting confused. I don't know if it's J.K. Rowling, she's on Salman Rushdie's side, or it's the paper saying they're on Liz Truss' side. I'm on your side, Liz Truss.
Don't worry at all. I think it's one of those mornings, certainly, we've got a lot to contend with in the papers, and trying to get through it all can be quite the focus. But this is the Express, basically flying the flag for Liz Truss. They are endorsing her, and in the papers this morning as well, we've seen that Lord Ashcroft has called her potentially the candidate that undecided voters will see as the most authentic. She's been called a political shapeshifter, but many of her critics feel that perhaps that shape-shifting is just moving from whatever the most popular statement or whatever the most popular soundbite might be to get the seat. I think we've got such a challenge ahead. Tomorrow we need to be hearing significant policies, suggestions of what's ahead. I think many of the public have not had a summer where they've been disappearing on holiday. Many people not just been focusing on getting back to the day job on Monday, they have been dealing with the reality of the worry and concern ahead. And as we've heard, there's been a letter written by 70 of our leading charities and organisations highlighting that this isn't just an economical challenge for many, it's a mental health challenge. It could affect education, it could affect so much more in terms of health of people. So we really do need clarity and action in terms of what are our leaders going to do. And I think if the Express have decided to pledge allegiance to Liz Truss in terms of the Conservative battle, that's one thing, but more on her policies would be helpful.
Nigel, we've got about a minute left, and I just want to get your take on this. I mean, when we went into this, the final two, did you think that it would be Liz Truss emerging as a front runner?
Yes, I always thought that she'd be the favourite amongst the membership if she made the final two. And I think the problem with the whole campaign is that both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been totally hung up on taxes, and in Liz Truss's case, cutting them. And of course, the kind of cuts she's talking about don't really touch the sides of the energy crisis we're facing.
Okay, Nigel and Kate, thank you so much. We're going to leave it there, but we'll of course see you in the next hour. Well, still to come here on Sky News Breakfast, we will of course have the latest on Sir Salman Rushdie, who is said to be off a ventilator and talking in hospital just a day after being stabbed several times before he gave a lecture in upstate New York.